Hello, this is Jack Jackson. Today we're going to be looking at an introduction to the TI84 calculator. Now, the TI84 is part of a family of calculators that Texas Instruments makes, which are scientific graphing calculators. The TI82, the TI83, and the TI84 all work essentially the same, and there's not a lot of difference in them. The 82 is the oldest, and they did make some significant improvements when they went from the 82 to the 83. Mainly, the biggest thing going from the 83 to the 84 is they made it where it runs a little faster, holds more memory, has more built-in apps, and adds a few functionality changes. But for the most part, these three calculators work basically the same. So the things that I'm going to show you for in TI84 here, at least in this video, will be the same for TI83 or 82 as well. So let's start with the most basic thing. You need to turn the calculator on. That's the on button. If you notice, that's down here in the lower left hand corner. So hit that to turn it on. To turn it off, hit the second button and then the on button. That'll be off. Notice off is printed in blue letters above the on key. In general, to get anything that's printed in blue letters above the key, hit the second key first. Similarly, to get anything that's in green, hit the green alpha key first. So every key has, almost every key has about three different things that could be used for it. So for example, the multiplication key here, if you just hit it, it's multiplication. But if you hit the second and then the multiplication, it gets a left bracket. If you hit the alpha and the multiplication key, you get the letter R. So each key has different meanings depending on whether you hit second or alpha before it or just hit it straight away. Okay, so let's start looking at some basic operations. I'll start with the simplest one I know. 1 plus 1, enter. Now, notice when you do this, what you enter shows up on the left here, and then when you hit enter, the answer shows up right justified on the right here on the next line. Notice that the white keys here are your basic number keys along with your decimal and your negative key. The enter key down here in the bottom right is very important because you're going to hit that at the end of a line. The gray keys here along with the one right above it are your basic operations of add, subtract, multiply, divide, and powers. And then we'll go on from there. Parentheses are right here, for example. Okay, let's do, there's an add. How about a subtract? 5 minus 3. Again, the answer is 2. 8 times 3. Notice that the multiplication looks like a little X on the key, but it looks more like an asterisk when you see it on the screen. But it still means multiplication. 9 divided by 3. Enter. Notice the dividing looks like a line with the two dots, that division symbol on the keyboard, but on the screen it's a slanted fraction line. Those both mean division. Powers, 2 to the power 3, and we get this. Now at this point, some of you may be saying, hey, wait a minute, my calculator doesn't look like that. It didn't actually put it up in a superscript. Well, that may be because you're not using the latest operating system. So let me show you something. Certainly if you have a TI82 or an older 83, it's not going to look like this. And maybe even if you have a TI84. So if I hit second and the plus key, I get to memory, and I go to about, and the first thing this tells me is which operating system I'm using. This is operating system 2.55. Now, as of today, I upgraded my operating system on my calculator, and so this is the most current one as of the date I'm doing this particular video. So, you may want to upgrade your operating system. The easiest way to do that probably is to just find me in my office with your calculator, and I can upgrade your operating system for you from my calculator to yours. Before you do that, you'll want to back up your programs, if you have any. You can also back it up by downloading the new version of the operating system directly from TI's website, and there's another video on how to do that. Okay, now I'm going to get out of this screen by doing quit, so that's the second and the mode key up here. And I'm back here. Now notice if I hit mode, the normal way to do things is have all these things on the left highlighted, but I want to go down a little bit further and show you something here, because this is going to make a little bit of difference. If you've got the newer operating system, you have a choice between Math Print and Classic. So if we go over to Classic, this is going to make it look like the original. So the way I did that is move the arrow keys to go up and down, get it over that, and then hit enter. And then I can go back and quit again. Now if I do 2 to the power 3, it appears like this on the screen. Okay? So this gives us some differences like that. Okay, so suppose I have 0.75 and I want to change that to a fraction form. Now what we're going to introduce here is menus. So many commands are right here on the keyboard, but we also have some other commands that aren't there. So for example, we can hit the math button here, and there are a number of other commands that are here as well, and the first one is change to fraction form. So I can hit enter, and that's going to change that 0.75 to fraction form, and it looks like that, 3/4. Now I'm going to go back to the math print version. Okay, do 0.75 math. I can either hit 1 or just hit enter, and then enter again. And now in the math print version, it prints fractions like this, 3/4. Okay, so the way it looks is a little bit different in the math print version and the classic version. Okay, let's look at some parentheses. Let's do a problem without parentheses first. 2 plus 3 times 4. Now we know order of operations says to do the multiplication first because it takes precedence over addition. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14. Must have hit enter twice there. Okay, so 14, that's our answer. But what if we want to do the 2 plus 3 first? We need to introduce some grouping symbols. So parentheses 2 plus 3, and then multiply the answer by 4. See, what would that be? That would be 2 plus 3 is 5, and then 5 times 4 should give us an answer of 20. So the use of parentheses, appropriate use of parentheses is going to be very, very important in working with a calculator. Making sure that you understand order of operations and that you're putting the correct amount of parentheses in. Now, when you're writing by hand, we can sometimes use brackets or braces as grouping symbols, but in the calculator we need to only use parentheses. Brackets and braces are reserved for other types of objects and for other things. Okay? If you do have the newer version of the calculator's operating system, there are some fraction things that are built in which are pretty nice. If you can go to alpha, and I believe it's F2. No. Shorthand to certain things that are also in menus. Most of those are in menus. Alpha F1. Okay, here's your fractions thing. So we can go here, and it gives us a template for a fraction. 5/6 plus, let's do that again, 4/5, and enter. And since it was entered as a fraction, our answer comes back as a fraction. We can go to here and say change from a fraction to a mixed number with number 3, and it will change that to a mixed number if we'd rather. Now, in the old operating system, the best you could have done was maybe done 5/6 plus 4/5, and the answer will come back as a decimal form, but then you can go ahead and change that answer to a fraction. It would look like 49/30 instead of 49 actually over 30. It would use a slanted fraction line rather than a horizontal one, but it still would convert that to a fraction, and so you'd still be fine. So you can do some fraction arithmetic even without the newer operating system, but the newer operating system makes fractions in particular a little bit nicer. And of course, as we've already seen, it makes exponents actually look like exponents. Okay, let me show you a few other basic commands that we have under the Math menu. Under Number, there we do have an absolute value, for example. ABS is absolute value. And notice here it actually comes out to be the absolute value signs. In the older operating system, it's going to say ABS, open parentheses, you put in the number, and then you put the closed parentheses. So the way some of the things look is a little bit different on the two systems. I really encourage you to get the new operating system if you have that. All of the TI84s are upgradable to this system. Notice that we have a button for pi, which gives a decimal approximation of pi. If you have a number here, and let's say we want to go back here and change a digit, if we go back to where we are, we can type this, and it by default it types over what's already there. If you hit delete, it deletes just that one digit. If you're at the end of the line, you can hit clear, and it clears the whole line. If you're at the end of the line and hit clear, it clears the whole line. If you're at the beginning of a line and hit clear, it clears the whole screen off. Now, if we take something like 2 times 6, and then I say plus 3. Well, addition is something that should be between two numbers, right? So it has to have something before the addition sign for it to make sense. Well, anytime you start out with something that should have something before it, and you didn't put something before it, it's going to assume that you're wanting to take your previous answer and add 3 and do whatever to it. So in this case, I pushed plus 3, and it says take my previous answer plus 3, which is 12 plus 3 is 15. This gives us a nice way of doing a few things here. Notice I could start with 0 and put enter. And if I put plus 3, it says take my previous answer and add 3, which is going to be 3. If I hit enter again, look what it does. It gives me my same entry that I did before, which says take your previous answer and add 3, but now the previous answer is 3 instead of 0, so now we've gone up to 6. So if I just keep hitting enter, it's going to continually just add 3, add 3, add 3, and so we get the multiples of 3 showing up here one at a time. So hitting enter will just give you your previous line. If I put 5 plus 2 times 6, now suppose I said, oh wait a minute, I want it to be 5 minus 2 times 6. That was a pretty short one, but if it's something complicated, I might not want to have to type it all again. If I do the second and hit the enter button, that's entry, it gives me my previous entry, and I can go back and edit that, and so now all I have to do is change that to subtraction. Let me talk a minute about the difference in negatives and subtraction. So negative 3, a negative thing, or to change the sign of or opposite sign of, is something you put on a single number. So a negative is something that applies to the number after it. That's negative 3. A subtraction is something you put between two numbers. So we could say subtract a negative 2. Notice the difference on the screen between the negative and the subtraction. The subtraction is centered and long compared to the negative, which is raised a little bit and shorter. And the answer is negative 1. One of the most common mistakes is getting confused between negatives and subtraction. They're not the same thing. A subtraction comes between two numbers, and it is an operation, a binary operation. It takes two numbers on either side of it and gives us an output of a single number. And a negative or negation sign there is a unary operation. It means it takes one number and changes its sign. Okay, how about we introduce some variables? So I can take, say, 2, hit the store button, and I can type in alpha and pick any of the letters here. You got A through Z, and you also have a theta here that you have access to. So 27 different letters, one Greek letter, the rest Roman letters. So I can choose this one right here, B, and hit enter, and it's going to give us 2. So now B is 2. So if I type alpha B, it's going to give me 2. So it's like you've got a little drawer that's labeled B, and you just open that and put a 2 in it. When you do this, anything that was in there before is now gone, and it's replaced with a 2. So now if I do 3B, B, that's going to be 3 times B, which is 6. Notice that the calculator does understand implied multiplication. I could have said 3 times B, but 3B in mathematics and in algebra, we let that be, we let implied multiplication exist here. Okay, so storing things as variables can be very handy. One variable in particular is very easy to get to, which is x, and I have happen to have 0 in x right at the moment. So I could say 6 store in x, and that one I don't have to hit the alpha key for. So now if I do 3 plus x, that's going to be 9. So that can be useful. So for example, if I have an expression like 3 times x plus 1, okay, now right now x is 6, so that's 3 times 6 is 18 plus 1 is 19. But if I take, what if I want to take that same thing but do it with a 2? Of course, this one's pretty easy to do in your head. 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. But I could do it this way. I could say store that as x, and then do second entry, which is my previous entry. Do it again, second entry, and that gives us the line before. And you can keep doing this, and it'll go back many levels back. And so you can keep hitting second entry until you get the one you want. So this time it's going to do 3x plus 1, but yet this time with that new value, the current value of x. Let's see what else we want to do. We do have some other things that we can do. You see absolute value. We can round off to a certain number of decimal place. We can find the integer part, the fraction part, some complex number things, some probability ideas. Arrows down mean there's more down here, and so there's some more things down here. Some of those are new. A couple of those at the bottom are new in this operating system. And that's the math menu. We also have a stat menu, a list menu, distribution variables, several other menus. We have trigonometric functions and inverse trigonometric functions right in here, and so forth. We do have a shorthand button to a square to second power because it's used a lot. So we can do that, or we can do 5 to the power 2 to get the same thing. And we have a shorthand button to a square root. The square root of 16 is 4. Now in the old operating system, let's take a look at how a couple things would look here in the older operating system. So I'm going to turn off math print. go back to Classic and see how a couple things look. So if we go to square root of 9, no, square root here opens the parentheses, so you have to close it. And that gives us 3. What would be different here? Absolute value. Absolute value, if you go over here, it's ABS of -8. Close parentheses. Okay, so I think that gives us the basics of the calculator, how to do some basic things. You might have something that works out like this. What if we do 5 to the 200th power? Well, that's too big. So we can get too big for the calculator to do. 5 to the 20th power. See what happens when we do that. Okay, so you see a notation here, 9.536743164, and then you see E13. This really means times 10 to the 13th power. So that's actually scientific notation. You can actually enter scientific notation this way. 2.5, and then you can say EE6, which is the same as 2.5 times 10 to the power 6. Okay. Let's go back to the math print. Let me see what happens if you do 2.5 times 10 to the 8th power. That's more like we would like to write it by hand, and it works out that way. What if I did 2.36 times 10 to the 15th power? This is going to use the same notation for the scientific notation that we got in the classic version too. If you want to refer to your previous answer, 5 plus 2, 7, and we want to use that 7 again, but not at the beginning of a calculation, but in the middle. So suppose we want to go 2 times, and we want to use our previous number. Of course, if it's just 7, we'd type 7, but suppose this is some really long decimal number. We didn't want to type all the digits in. We could go second, and then the negative key gives us answer, and then maybe we're doing something else with it, plus 9. And so it will grab our previous answer and place that in there wherever it goes. And again, if you start with something like a divides that's supposed to have something in front of it, then you definitely will want to it will definitely want something in front of that, and it will assume that you're wanting to use your previous answer. Okay, I think that gives us a basic idea. Let me look at one more thing here on editing. 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if I go back here and I maybe didn't want to type that 5, I could delete it. If I type now on something, it's going to type over what's there. If I would rather go back in, I can insert something. So between the 2 and the 3, if I type, it's going to type over the 3. But if I want to, I can see the insert is up here. So I can go second and the insert, which is the blue up here. And now whatever I type is going to be inserted at that point. So you can insert things using that. Okay, I think that gives us a pretty good introduction to the really most basic things on the calculator. As we go through the course and we introduce more advanced things that we'll be studying, then we'll come back to learning how to do them on the calculator. So we'll use the calculator a little bit later on. There'll be a video on how to do graphs and tables and maybe some other things that are more advanced with the calculator as we need them.